This is a story loosely based on a non-fiction book chronicling the life of Benedetta Carlini. She was a Catholic nun who lived in the 17th century, known for her mystical visions and her lustful relationship with another nun that led to her imprisonment and eventual isolation from the convent. The movie starts with the Carlini family on their way to Pescia. Their only daughter, Benedetta, is set to join the Theatine convent. She is raised under a religious tutelage by her father. At a young age, Benedetta has already developed strong religious views. She considers herself to be blessed by her guardian angels, especially the Blessed Virgin Mary, to whom she looks up. This is shown during their encounter with bandits. One of the men steals the necklace from Benedetta's mother. However, Benedetta bravely tells them that the Blessed Virgin will punish them if they don't return the jewelry. She knows this because the Blessed Virgin does what she asks of her. On cue, a bird from a nearby tree flies and defecates on one of the men. The bandits all laugh, taking this incident lightheartedly. In the end, they return the necklace and leave the family unharmed. They eventually reach the convent, which at that time is still under construction. There, they are welcomed by the young novice Christina, who shows them the way to the abbess office. Mr. Carlini is attended to by Abbess Felicita, together with the convent's confessor, Ricordati. Mr. Carlini promises to annually deliver fruits and wine for the next 25 years. The Carlini family is considered middle class, therefore he can afford such a dowry. But Abbess Felicita points out that, although it's a generous offer, it's not enough to compete with the others who also want to enter the convent. They haggle until they reach the agreement of 100 gold coins as Benedetta's dowry, in addition to the promised fruits and wine. In real-life context, girls were expected to pay a dowry when entering a convent in the 17th century, as they were considered brides of Christ. This dowry helped sustain the institution while allowing them to live a spiritually led communal life. Once the agreement is reached, Benedetta is given her new, albeit low-quality dress compared to her silk gown. The nun tells her that this place teaches a life of simplicity. There's no need for fancy garments or flower crowns. The nun also takes away her figurine of the Virgin Mary, saying they have their own larger version within the convent. Then, Benedetta is led to her room, or rather, to her dedicated bed space, separated from others by a curtain. It takes time for Benedetta to adjust. To comfort herself, she walks up to the large statue of the nursing Mary outside the hall and prays. An incident happens when the statue becomes unbalanced and falls on her. Benedetta sucks on the exposed chest, since she thinks she's Mary's daughter in the convent. The nuns, including Felicita and Christina, rush to her aid after hearing the crash. They all find it surprising that Benedetta is unscathed. Once it's assured that there's no lasting harm, Felicita orders everyone to go back to bed. Christina, her daughter, runs after her and marvels that what happened to Benedetta is a miracle. Felicita corrects her daughter, saying miracles don't just appear everywhere. Most of the time, they're just simple incidents. This whole sequence is like a foreshadowing of the events that will happen later. 18 years have passed since. There's not much that happened to Benedetta, who has adjusted fully to life inside the convent. However, one incident will be the catalyst for her subsequent actions and reputation as a mystic nun. During a stage play, Benedetta acts as the Virgin Mary. Her parents are present among the audience as the convent's honorable guests. In one scene, she's supposed to be ascended after sacrificing her life. While waiting for her cue to be lifted, she looks at the novice who plays Jesus the shepherd. Benedetta suddenly gets a strong vision of Jesus surrounded by lambs, calling her name. He beckons her to come, as she is his wife. Elated, Benedetta runs to him. She is so deep into her visions that she doesn't realize her feet are pattering when she's supposed to be still. She has to pull herself back to reality. At the banquet later, she tells her mother about her visions. She feels excited. After all, she's the bride of Christ. After the banquet, Felicita hosts the Carlinis before bidding them goodbye. While they are talking, they are interrupted by frantic knocks on the gate. A young woman enters, followed by a herd of sheep. This woman kneels right in front of Benedetta, asking for help. A man also enters, and this is the woman's father. Using his cane, he pulls the woman by the belt. It's clear that he's cruel towards his daughter, and that's why she wants to run away. She pleads with Felicita to admit her here in the convent. Although concerned, Felicita reiterates that the woman has to pay for her entrance, but she has no dowry to offer. Seeing the woman's struggles, Benedetta asks her parents to help. Her mother agrees to pay for the woman's dowry, and Mr. Carlini reluctantly agrees. From then on, the wide-eyed Bartolomea becomes a novice in the convent. Benedetta helps the woman clean herself. The woman's name is Bartolomea. She's playful and has the tendency to show willfulness. She's so giddy about taking a bath with warm water and soap, she almost slips. Benedetta reaches her hand to catch her, but instead, she accidentally touches Bartolomea's chest through the thin curtain. She feels flustered at the touch, and this bothers her. Bartolomea seems to not mind about this, which adds to Benedetta's concern. She tells Bartolomea where her clothes are, before hurrying away. That night, Bartolomea asks Benedetta to accompany her to the private chambers to defecate. Benedetta decides to go with her. She thinks the young woman needs to be trained more in modesty, as Bartolomea is inclined to exclaim loudly about things that are novel to her. While the woman cleans herself, Benedetta sees the bruises on her leg. Unconcerned, Bartolomea explains that her father had taken her for his after her mother passed. She also experienced from her older brother. The reason she ran away earlier is that she tried to hurt her father with a pair of scissors, which enraged the latter. Benedetta can only comment that beauty has attacks. Bartolomea responds that even if she looks like a sheep, she still would have the same predicament. Then it dawns on her what Benedetta said. She's gleeful that the nun called her beautiful. Benedetta tells her to come closer, so Bartolomea can see her beauty in her eyes. At that moment, there's definitely tension between them, as shown in Benedetta's gleaming eyes. When they return to their beds, Bartolomea gives her a full kiss on the lips. Bartolomea's presence has rattled something deep within Benedetta. Her uncertainty about her feelings for the novice seems to be reflected in her visions. The very first instance that the nuns witness one of her episodes is during a choir practice. Bartolomea sneaks her hand up Benedetta's behind, which makes her gasp audibly. The next thing she knows, 3 snakes are angrily hissing and crawling towards her. Fortunately, Jesus comes to her rescue, slaying those snakes with his sword. He explains that these animals are the demon's attempt to separate her, his wife, from him. He pulls Benedetta closer and kisses her. Benedetta reaches out her hand, then she gets pulled back to reality. The nuns are all perplexed by her behavior. She returns to her place in the group, glaring at Bartolomea, who looks innocently at her. Later she confesses to Ricordati about her vision. From what she understands from his lecture, her vision is false, because she feels fear instead of joy. To truly know if her visions are true, she must endure suffering. Benedetta finds an opportunity for this when, later that day, an incident happens while they are producing spools of silk. Christina accidentally bumps into Bartolomea, causing a tray of spools to drop into a cauldron of boiling water. Benedetta steps in to ease the tension, and she sides with Christina. She orders Bartolomea to retrieve the pools using her bare hands. Though indignant, the novice follows the nun's order. Still not satisfied, Benedetta tells her to continue until all spools are retrieved. Christina intervenes, just as Sister Petra arrives to see what the commotion is about. Benedetta disregards the incident, saying Bartolomea burned her hands. Felicita learns about this and asks Benedetta why she did this. Benedetta says she's only inflicting pain on the novice so she may vicariously suffer with her. She believes that through this, she may know her visions and become closer to God. Felicita corrects her, saying that it's through personal suffering that one gets closer to God, not through the suffering of others. As a consequence of her actions, Benedetta is tasked with caring for the ailing Sister Jacob. That night, she finds out about Sister Jacob's wounds on her chest. The nun says, this is how God has marked her for her sins. Everyone is a sinner, even the righteous nuns in this convent, and they are all marked. Benedetta gets an idea to check her own chest to see if she's a sinner. Using a shiny plate as a mirror, she sees that her chest is smooth and normal. In her mind, this is proof that she's not a sinner, and that God favors her in all ways. Deep in the night, everyone is disturbed by shrieks of pain coming from inside the convent. Benedetta is having nightmares, causing her to toss and turn around the bed, crying for help. The nuns have to restrain her just so she won't accidentally hurt herself. The doctor who checked on her declares everything is normal with Benedetta, but she leaves a potion of poppy in case it happens again. When Benedetta has calmed down, she gets a visit from Bartolomea. The latter shows her blistering hand, asking why she must be cruel to her. Then she gives Benedetta an intimate kiss, declaring she wants to be with her. Later, Benedetta has another nightmare again. This time, she's being chased by the bandits from her childhood. An unknown man in white robes saves her, whom she initially thinks is Jesus. But she finds out he's not. This man forces himself on her, cutting her chest with his dagger. Benedetta's affliction persists. In the end, Felicita decides to give her a roommate to be her caretaker, and that roommate is Bartolomea. Benedetta worries that Bartolomea will torment her for revenge. However, the novice says she has no intentions to do so. Benedetta is puzzled by this response, wondering whether what happened earlier was real or simply part of her nightmares. Bartolomea puts her clothes in the drawer, and that's where she discovers Benedetta's statuette of the Virgin Mary. She puts it on the bedside table, hoping to make the sick feel better. That night, Benedetta gets another vision. This time, Jesus Christ is on the cross, beckoning her to come. He tells her to take her clothes off, and he offers to make her suffer so she can show her love for him. She screams, waking Bartolomea. Through the curtain, the novice glimpses Benedetta standing without any clothes. She falls to the ground, seemingly tripping over a pile of ceramics. Bartolomea sees the wound on Benedetta's hand. Even as a novice, she knows what this means. The next day, Benedetta walks into the choir practice, showing the nuns the wounds on her hands and feet. Almost everyone exclaims in reverence as they recognize the stigmata. Everyone, except Felicita and Christina. Felicita asks Benedetta about when her wounds occurred, to which the latter replies they occurred while she was sleeping. Bartolomea seconds this. Felicita knows something is up. St. Francis of Assisi received the stigmata while praying, as well as St. Catherine of Siena. None of them were asleep when the stigmata appeared, and it surely doesn't appear while one is in bed. She orders an examination of the wounds to verify Benedetta's claim. The abbot of Pescia, Alfonso Cecchia, arrives at the convent to help with the examination. They verify that the wounds are indeed real, but as to how they were formed, they cannot ascertain. Felicita checks Benedetta's forehead. No wounds are visible. She explains that those wounds are crucial to fully verifying the occurrence of this specific miracle. She ends the examination and allows Benedetta to go with Bartolomea. When the two walk past the statue of the nursing Mary, Benedetta orders Bartolomea to leave her there so she can pray. Meanwhile, Felicita and the abbot talk about what happened. Felicita says that in all cases of the stigmata occurring, the marks on the forehead are always included, as it denotes the crown of thorns that Jesus wore in his crucifixion. She doesn't admit that Benedetta's stigmata is real or fake, but it's puzzling that the forehead wounds are missing. On the other hand, the abbot is thinking about a different thing. He mentions the town of Assisi, where St. Francis came from. The place shot into fame and riches, with believers making their pilgrimage there. The miracle of the saint made the town, and the church, rich, and he wonders if the same thing can happen to Pescia with Benedetta's wounds. It will be nice to receive blessings if so. Felicita reminds him that the Holy See will be the one to manage whatever wealth may accumulate, not him. Just then, they hear a commotion outside. They see Benedetta bent over on the floor, with Christina trying to help her. When she comes up, Benedetta is visibly bleeding from her forehead. Then, with an unfamiliar, deeper voice, she gives a bone-chilling declaration. The plague will ravage Pescia, but there's a way to save the people, and that is through his blessing, who is his wife Benedetta. Whoever doesn't believe will be persecuted. With that, Benedetta falls unconscious again. Only Christina is not convinced by this proclamation, especially after stepping on shards of broken glass nearby. Felicita thinks this has gone too far and pleads with the abbot to think rationally, but even the abbot is carried away, fearing that the proclamation will come true. He claims that what he has witnessed was a true miracle, and they truly heard the voice of Christ through Benedetta. It'll be a blasphemy to think otherwise. He challenges the abbess to oppose him. Much to Christina's surprise, Felicita agrees with the abbot. Still, he doesn't believe her, thinking she'll backstab him later. He warns her that her skepticism will have consequences. News about Benedetta's visions and stigmata spread all over the town. People start offering fruits and vegetables in front of the convent, already revering Benedetta as their saint. Only Christina remains steadfast in her skepticism. When she tells this to her mother, Felicita points out she has no concrete evidence against Benedetta. Christina is taken aback. Why does her mother defend Benedetta when she also doesn't believe it all to be real? Felicita replies that God works in mysterious ways. Perhaps Benedetta's visions are his way of saying something to them. What Felicita doesn't explain to her daughter is that this incident will be politically beneficial for their convent, and that it's better to go with the flow than against it. That night, Benedetta has another vision, where Jesus has given her his heart as his bride. Benedetta calls Bartolomea to touch her chest, where Christ has laid his heart. Bartolomea reaches out and fondles Benedetta. This triggers something primitive in them. Their moans become louder and louder until they catch other nuns' attention. Bartolomea says Benedetta is having another nightmare, while the latter says everything's fine. When they're alone again, their hands reach through the thin curtain. They've acknowledged within themselves that what they feel for each other is more than sisterly love. The next day, the abbot conducts a mass, declaring Benedetta's miracles to be true. Then he announces that she will replace Felicita as the convent's mother superior. Christina, who's playing the organ, bangs the instrument loudly in protest. She questions why Benedetta is appointed by the abbot when they, the sisters, should be the ones choosing their leader. She doesn't believe that Jesus or God chose Benedetta, nor in her so-called miracles. Felicita only orders her daughter to sit. Then, the abbot tells Felicita to make the appointment final. It's official. Benedetta is now the abbess of the Theatine convent. Felicita gathers her things from her room, as it will now be occupied by Benedetta and her novice, Bartolomea. Despite the disgrace she was forced to face, she still has an ace up her sleeve. She moves a vase aside, revealing an inconspicuous hole in the wall. The time it will take for the occupants to discover this will be hers to use to spy on them. Benedetta and Bartolomea arrive, the latter clearly giddy about the upgrade she's going to experience. Once Felicita leaves them, Bartolomea teases the new abbess by slightly touching her chest. They are interrupted by another nun, who announces Sister Jacob's worsening condition. Felicita and Christina are already there. They have both offered to look after the nun. Benedetta allows Christina to do so, but she asks Felicita to attend the mass she will hold as the new abbess. Felicita quietly agrees. When the mother and daughter are alone with the sick, Christina questions her mother's compliance with what's happening. Felicita finally explains that she's only following the rules of the game. Benedetta's miracles will put their convent on the map, and they'll receive financial benefits once the abbot becomes the Bishop of Pescia. She has dedicated her whole life to the convent's benefit. She doesn't mind if her demotion will mean good things for the convent. Still, Christina firmly believes this is all blasphemy. Felicita warns her daughter that going against what people believe and accept will destroy her, and she won't defend her when it happens. Yet Christina's steadfastness in her values influenced her decision later that day. She sets up a confession with Ricordati about Benedetta's lies. Ricordati reminds her that she's now talking about the Mother Superior, and therefore should be careful with her words. But Christina continues, saying that Benedetta's stigmata are false, and her miracles are blasphemy. She reveals that Benedetta's forehead wounds were self-inflicted using glass shards, as opposed to appearing by miracle. When Ricordati asks her if she saw it herself, Christina says yes. In truth, she never actually saw the act. She only saw Benedetta already wounded and the shards on the floor. She just connected the dots, without verifying her assumptions. Meanwhile, Benedetta remains oblivious to this confession. She spends her nights teaching Bartolomea how to count and write numbers. However, this leads to an intimate moment between them. They are acting on the tension that already existed between them since the start. This intimacy becomes a carnal desire, and they both satisfy their lust with each other. For a moment, Bartolomea resembles Jesus from Benedetta's vision. The next day, as the nuns are about to take their lunch, Ricordati comes in to announce that one of the sisters has something to say. He then calls Christina to express to everyone what burdens her heart at the moment. Although unsure, Christina stands in front of her sisters. She looks at her mother, who subtly shakes her head in warning. This causes Christina to be more defiant. She reveals to everyone that Benedetta is a fraud, that her wounds are all self-inflicted and didn't appear miraculously. Ricordati asks her if she saw the action, to which she says yes. Christina also reveals that she told the previous abbess about this. Felicita is called in front as well to confirm this. When Ricordati asks her if it's true, Felicita's answer breaks her daughter's heart. She says Christina is highly suspicious, but she wasn't there when Benedetta's wounds appeared. Christina is humiliated. Her mother did tell her she wouldn't defend her. She was taught all her life to reject lies, and yet the truth she believes in fails her in this moment. It doesn't help that Benedetta suddenly lashes out. In a deep voice, she claims Christina to be possessed by a demon. Therefore, she must punish herself through self-flagellation. Felicita chooses to turn her back on her daughter. That night, Bartolomea gives Benedetta a gift. It turns out to be Benedetta's Virgin Mary statuette, in which the bottom half is sculpted into a smooth, elongated oblong, used for This is to celebrate Benedetta's power play earlier. The two start engaging in sinful acts, unaware that someone is watching them through the hole in the wall. But they stop when Bartolomea notices the dark night sky becomes bright red. A comet passes by, giving an ominous presence above them. They are all looking up when they see Christina on the roof. Everyone is shocked, including Felicita, who immediately runs to stop her daughter. But it's too late. Christina jumps to her demise. Benedetta approaches the nun. She says that her prayer will save Christina's soul from hell. But Felicita, who's already come down, pushes her away from her daughter's body. A scuffle ensues, in which Felicita calls Benedetta a vile joke. They have to be separated by Sister Petra. Later, while the nuns prepare her daughter's body for burial, Felicita decides it's time to take matters into her own hands. She leaves the convent and travels to Florence, where she'll seek an appointment with the nuncio, the appointed diplomat for the Holy See. Benedetta finds this out, but she's not afraid of the implications. However, when she tells this to Bartolomea, the novice becomes afraid. She finally realizes what it will mean if the bishop finds out about their sins. She sees Benedetta being calm, even arrogant, in thinking that no harm will come to her. After all, God's will is expressed through her, even his lust. Bartolomea starts to realize that perhaps there's some truth to Christina's claims. Benedetta's behavior begins to freak her out, especially when she says that shame does not exist under the protection of God's love. Benedetta uses the Almighty's name in vain, just to feed her ego and her pleasures. Despite her willfulness, Bartolomea knows this isn't how a representative of God is supposed to act. In Florence, the streets are already filled with the victims of the plague, but Felicita pays them no mind. Her focus is to have an audience with the nuncio. She finally meets him and makes a statement about the profane acts that Benedetta committed. The nuncio couldn't care less about what's happening to Pescia, but Felicita eventually convinces him to pay a visit. She has nothing and no more to lose, whether her accusations are proven true or not. Back in Pescia, the townspeople hold a vigil under the comet that seems to have not advanced since it appeared. The abbot, who leads the vigil, declares that the comet is a sign that sinners will be punished with the plague. They all kneel and fervently pray for their salvation. However, Benedetta remains standing, claiming that she's received a message from God. She says the town will be spared from the plague if they choose to believe her, the bride of Christ. Everyone reveres her as the new Messiah. She then orders the guards to close the town's gate, ensuring that no one will enter or leave Pescia. Just as the nuns return inside the convent, Benedetta collapses. She doesn't respond to Bartolomea's calls, which makes it seem like she's passed away all of a sudden. When Felicita returns to Pescia with the nuncio, she finds out that the convent has been closed. They are told by the guards that, by Benedetta's orders, no one is allowed to enter or leave the premises. The abbot even has to face the nuncio, his superior, and tell him that he's only following the orders of the miraculous Santa Benedetta, who unfortunately passed away that morning. However, the nuncio disregards the abbot's claims. He uses force to enter the convent's premises. On his way to see the nun's body, the nuncio and his envoys encounter young girls wearing angel costumes. Recordati explains that Benedetta predicted her own passing, thus giving them instructions beforehand. When she passes away, they must prepare her burial grounds. They must also prepare novices in angel costumes to accompany her ascension to heaven. The nuncio remains stoic until he reaches the hall where the nun's body is placed. He examines Benedetta's skin for any signs of the plague. When he sees none, he himself starts the last rites given to those who have passed. To the surprise of everyone, Benedetta opens her eyes and gets up, begging for Jesus to not leave her. She tells everyone that she's seen their souls falling victim to the plague, and the only way to save them is to make sure she's alive, as it's why she was sent out of heaven and back to earth. But the nuncio won't believe her. Right there and then, he charges her with blasphemy and sexual perversion. In the following trial, the nuncio accuses Benedetta of falsifying her stigmata and committing unspeakable acts of lustful sin. Felicita testifies against her, recounting what she witnessed on the night the comet appeared. For it is she who was looking through that hole, witnessing the perversion of Benedetta and Bartolomea using the carved statuette. The nuncio then calls Bartolomea and asks her to confess. But the novice remains loyal to Benedetta, denying all charges. The nuncio offers Bartolomea a chance to save her soul by confessing Benedetta's crimes. But the novice maintains that she has nothing to confess. After the trial, Bartolomea is brought to the convent's lower floors for an apparent confession. But this turns out to be a ruse, as the nuncio's men intend to torment her until they get what they want. As the nuncio leaves, Bartolomea's scream reverberates all over the convent. Benedetta cries for her sacrifice. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Felicita has incurred the plague. The nuncio goes to the Mother Superior's room, which has been hastily prepared for his stay, since no one expected Benedetta to resurrect. To his surprise, Benedetta pays him a visit. She sees the nuncio removing his shoes, so she decides to wash his feet. The imagery bears a strong resemblance to that scene in the Bible where Mary Magdalene washes Jesus' feet. The only difference is that Mary Magdalene did it to repent. Benedetta is doing it to gain favor. While washing his feet, she plucks a flea from his leg. The nuncio doesn't seem to notice as he continues to threaten the abbess. But Benedetta looks at him bravely, for she has created a plan to save herself from execution. The nuncio's men interrupt them, dragging a pitiful Bartolomea. she's decided she's not going to suffer for Benedetta. She frees herself from the men and goes to the podium, where Benedetta's logbook is placed. She opens it, revealing the mentioned statuette nestled in the hollow within the pages. At last, the nuncio can enact the punishment for Benedetta's crimes. Following this, Bartolomea is immediately expelled from the convent. The nuncio meets with Ricordati and the abbot, who don't look happy with the way things are going. Benedetta is their ticket to fame and wealth. But now, that chance is going up in flames, quite literally, as they are ordered to prepare a public viewing of Benedetta's burning at the stake. After his meeting with them, the nuncio discovers that he has incurred the plague as well. He suspects that Felicita is the one who infected him. Speaking of Felicita, her health rapidly declines. She's been isolated, but Benedetta visits her. Benedetta says she's been told that Cristina is waiting for her in heaven, but Felicita doesn't believe her. She never did, since the beginning. But in her last moments, she'll allow herself to accept Benedetta's nonsense. She begs to tell her what else God says to her. In her carelessness, she pushes a mug out of the table, causing it to break into pieces. This just adds to Benedetta's arsenal as she fulfills the nun's last request. Eventually, the day of Benedetta's execution comes. The public remains adamant that Benedetta is innocent, that she's their savior from the plague. The nuncio gives her one last chance to publicly confess her sins. Benedetta agrees, but she does something different. After putting her hands together, she raises them, revealing her stigmata. In a dramatic presentation, Benedetta claims the angel of demise has arrived, but that angel of demise is simply Felicita garbed in black robes. She's been convinced by Benedetta to implicate the nuncio in bringing the plague to town, showing her blisters to an agitated public. The nuncio screams for Benedetta to be tied to the stake. The public's unrest grows stronger, exacerbated by Bartolomea's claims that they will all be punished if they let Benedetta burn. Alas, the guards' spears are no match to the public's fervor, who push themselves to free Benedetta and attack the nuncio. The fire has already lit the stake, but Bartolomea manages to untie Benedetta, discovering a shard of glass under her feet in the process. Chaos ensues as the mob attacks the nuncio, revealing his rapidly spreading blisters. Before he breathes his last, Benedetta comes to him, offering him a prayer, but he spits at her face, calling her a liar till the very end. Bartolomea pulls Benedetta away from the crowd, but before they leave, they see Felicita stepping into the burning pyre in an act of self-immolation. A day after the incident, we see Benedetta and Bartolomea sleeping in a stable. Benedetta wants to go back to the convent to fulfill her duties, but Bartolomea stops her. There's nothing waiting for her there. Bartolomea naively believes she can start a new life with her, but Benedetta is firm in believing she will be accepted back with open arms, that her miracles still hold true to the convent and the public. Bartolomea reveals the shard she picked up from the pyre, saying she now knows that Benedetta faked everything. She calls her selfish and a hypocrite, but Benedetta won't listen to her. Bartolomea is just an object of her desire, nothing more, nothing less. She leaves the girl and heads back to town. In the end, it's revealed that Benedetta Carlini was refused the status of martyrdom. She lived until 70 years of age, in isolation within the confines of the convent. There are times she's allowed to attend Mass and dine with the sisters, but she must remain on the floor. Just as she declared before, the town of Pescia is spared from the plague.